Okay. Hi, everybody. I'm Veronica Bilot. I'm the English subject specialist librarian, and your professor, ML Liebler, has asked me to come here and talk to you a little bit about finding some resources for your big papers. So ML, we had talked a little bit about how do we find things in like historical newspapers, articles from the time, right?
From the time, but also the Times, the New York Times.
Yes, and from the Times. So I'm going to share my screen. So let me just go ahead and do that. And what I'm going to do, there's my email. So I'm going to start at the library homepage because that's where we always want to start. And I'm sure some of you have already noticed, some of you students, that you may have found articles in newspapers or other resources, and then you go click on them and you can't access them. So that's another thing the libraries do, is we provide access because we license these resources as opposed to just searching around on the web. So here we are in the library homepage. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to our article databases, and I'm going to select newspapers here to start with, okay? And so instead of just going in a really big search, we're going to be a lot more focused and look at a particular resource. So you can see what we've got here are a lot of different news resources. So first of all, I don't know if any of the cases that you're assigned involve African Americans, but if they do, we have historical newspapers going back to 1827. So you could take a look there. But we're going to start with the New York Times. So we're just going to scroll down here and you'll see that there's a lot of different titles here. So what we want, I'm going to look at this New York Times historical full text. Notice it tells me this runs from 1851 to 2006. So you're not going to find anything current or after 2006 here. To do that, we would actually have to look at the New York Times, either one of these. I would say look at this one because it's a little easier to search in. How would you know that? You wouldn't. Some of this stuff is just trial and error. A lot of this stuff is why we're here to give you a hand. So here we go. And it's going to ask me to log in with my access ID and password because it's a library resource. And then, bad request. My goodness. I might have to change browsers. Let me try this. Don't usually use Edge. So are you seeing like a different browser window with a lake?
Yep.
Okay.
Yes.
So if things don't work, I always say try a different browser. If you're in Chrome, try Firefox or Edge or something else. So I'm going to go, sorry about that, back to the newspapers. Stuff happens. I have no idea why that's not working. All right, so we've got our newspapers here. We're going to look at New York Times Historical. Let's hope it works now. If not, I'm going to blame COVID. There we go. Chrome is getting really funky. It like you have to be Chrome, like you got to clear your cache a lot of times. It does a lot of weird stuff. So I find it's not the best browser to use anymore. So the name was that we were going to look for first was Peter Levine. Is that correct?
That is correct. 1938. Okay.
So we're going to do, I'm just going to search for Peter, Levine.
Yep.
Is that right? Okay. So yep, Peter Levine, like, was it a murder case?
It's a kidnapping and murder.
Okay. So I'm going to put in the word kidnap, and then I'm going to put an asterisk after it. No space. What that does is it will find the word kidnap, kidnapper, kidnapping. So, because I don't know what the article might have it. So now I'm going to do a search. This is all live, folks, too. I have no idea what's going to pop up. Aha. And here we go. And you can see what's kind of cool here is if you look at the date line here, yes, you can see that there's like, you know, one article that comes up. It might even be just a random Peter Levine, but look at all the articles from 1938 and 39.
Yep.
So this is, and there were some from 1940 through 49. There's 7 articles written after that. So here's the articles. You can just click on this full text PDF to get to the article itself. There it is. And there you go. And the beauty of using a database is you can even click on this little cite button and it'll compile a citation for you. Just note that these are not perfect. So when you turn in your paper, it should not be in all caps.
All right.
Okay. So just a FYI. But at least it gives you all the information that you need. Okay, so that's searching a historical database, a historical newspaper database. And the way that we can find those is by going to article database page, going to newspapers in the subjects list, and then just scrolling through the list till we find a historical newspaper database that we want, or a newer one. So we can see we've got the Chicago Tribune historical, we've got the Free Press historical, and a back file. Notice there's 2 different sets of data here. So watch your dates. New York Times. I think that's about it. Oh, and Washington Post. So, and Wall Street Journal. So that's a pretty broad range. Now, the other thing you talked about was finding like old magazine articles from.
Yeah, I want them to find as much material. I do ask them to look for, possible mention in a couple of books. And, the whole thing is an investigation, just like originally it was. So even what we're talking about now, and I'm going to make sure the students understand that, what we're doing is exactly how they should be approaching the project, is just looking everywhere and anywhere and accumulating an understanding of the case, which probably the first article will give one, most of the information to start. And then following leads up with names that are brought up in these articles. And that, so they, newspapers is big. I have given them a list of, you need at least this many newspapers, and I'm talking like 20, 25. You need at least this many journals, this many magazines, other film, art, depending on what the case is.
Sure.
So anyway, that's the idea of it. Now, the next step would be, let's assume that the Peter Levine, just for the sake of this video, that Peter Levine was an African-American. He was not, but let's just say, then there's another lead for you right there with the African-American newspapers. You can click on that, I guess, and then you put in the one thing that you do all the time, which I want to be clear on. When you're searching, you always put the quotation marks around it. And I know you've explained that to my classes before, but is that essential?
What it does is it helps to make your search more precise.
Okay.
So I'm trying to remember the name of the doctor who was
Ocean Sweet.
Yes, Ocean's. Yes.
OSI, either OSSIAN and then Sweet.
I think that's how.
That's a
yeah. So I'm putting it in quotes because what it does is it keeps that name, first name, last name order together.
Okay.
So, and it does that if you're searching any phrases. So if you were searching, for example, social work, you would want to put that in quotes, or peanut butter, you would want to put it in quotes. Words that have meaning when they're next to each other in that order. Okay. But what you got to be careful about is you can't just put quotes around random stuff, because if it only makes sense in your head, but nobody else's, it's not going to find it.
All right.
So, but so here we go. I think that's how you spell his name. Yeah.
Yeah, it is.
There we go. Okay, great. So here's like, what's nice about this particular paper, these particular sets of papers, is it lets you look at a broad range of paper altogether. Mm-hmm. So there's lots of different things that are here in this particular database, but that's what you could do in this database. So if you have any sort of African-American connection to your with your case that you've been assigned, you could take a look at this database. You know what else I want to show you is like how to find that other stuff that you were talking about.
Yeah, that's what I wanted to know. I was going to ask that.
Yeah. So, you know, so now we know how to find newspaper articles. And again, the reason why we want to use the libraries is because we have access to that content that we would have to pay for on the free web. So over here on the far right is something called Summon. Summon is a way to search almost all the library's full text resources all at the same time.
Oh.
But I can do something that makes it act just like Google, but better. So, so give me another topic. Give me another good case.
Let's say the Willie Lynch case, Lynchwillie. This is off the top of my head. I'm thinking 1943, maybe.
Okay. So again, I'm going to put his name in quotes, keep it together as a phrase.
And it's a murder.
Was this what kind of nefarious activity went on? Was this a murder?
Yeah, it was a murder.
Okay.
It actually, I think, was a lynching, but ironic.
Oh, okay. All right, so we're going to take a look here. Now this has given me 159 results. I'm not really sure what's going to be here.
I'll tell you.
And again, Willie Lynch is he's not the only person in the world with that name. So other things are going to come up,
Right.
You know, but what you probably got here is, I would imagine, like I'm looking at the title of this article and I'm wondering if I do the preview, I can see what this article is about, and there might be something about this particular murder in this article. And this is a scholarly article.
Right.
How do I know that? Well, partially I know because of the way that it looks in this database. And partially, if I actually take a look, first of all, it's called the Journal of Human Behavior in the Social Environment. I don't think I would be able to buy that at CVS. So it kind of gives me a hint.
That's good.
And also I can see that it's got an extensive number of pages. So I can tell just kind of by looking at it this way, this is probably a scholarly article.
Right.
So that's something that you could take a look at. The other thing that you could do is we've got this date range here. So if we wanted to see if we could find anything, and we could see there's a lot of like subject terms associated. These are like hashtags.
Mm-hmm.
So if I did murders and murder attempts, that would bring up the 45 articles that.
So that's the guy. I don't know if we can discern just a quick glance what year it might be.
Okay. So these articles are like subsequent articles. It looks like there's also a Willie Lynch who was murdered in Limerick.
Yeah, that's what I'm seeing there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so that happens. You have to be careful. So what we could do, for example, is we could take, and you said it was in the 1930s?
Yeah, I think it was in the 40s.
Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to tell it to look for articles from 1930 to 1950.
Yeah.
So I'm giving this publication date here and see if anything comes up there. Nope, no results. Well, it could be, maybe I need to take this off.
Yeah.
Okay. So there we go, 1930 to 1950.
Ambulance fee.
This one's from 36. And again, you know, part of the issue is that was not the only Willie Lynch in the world. So trying to find something that way.
Right. And that's part of this process. It's, you know, sometimes you go down the, the wrong road and then you discover that. And that's okay. That's all part of learning research. It's investigation. One of the things I thought of in more recent years with this, I don't really watch these shows, but I've heard of them. You know, these NCIS or NISC or whatever those crime shows are really popular. And probably most students have seen some version of that. You know what I mean? I don't know even the names. And one of them they shoot on my friend's street in New York City that's a big popular one. But at any rate, so that's kind of, this is all worthwhile. Even if you come up with the wrong Willie Lynch, at least you kind of tried. But what would have happened with this too, for the students' purposes, is you would, when you get in the New York Times, and all of these are major stories in the Times, that would give you the background on this case.
Right.
So you would know what year. I may be off on the year. You would know, was it, I'm just thinking it was WLLIE. It could have been WILLY. There's many, many different possibilities here.
I'm curious, do you know anything about the city that it was in or state?
Well, it was in the South. It seems.
Okay. Could we try a different name?
Yeah. Let me just off the top of my head here. I don't know if anybody has this, but the Black Hand murders. And this would have been in early 1900s.
Okay, let's try those.
Yeah, I mean, at least that one, it says Black Hand Terror. That book, that.
Yep, here's one here. So you'll notice what happens is that you get your search results and then it'll give you news results. So this one is Black Hand Murders. This is from the New York Times. So it pulled it in from the New York Times, and it's from 1911.
Right.
So we got a few clues here, like you were talking about. So we've got Chicago. This is talking about Chicago. So we got some kind of Chicago connection. So I would probably go look in the Chicago historical newspaper. I forgot which Chicago paper it was, but anyway, I would look there. And then I also can see that bomb explosions. So that's something else, that there's something to do with bombs that had in this particular murder case. So that's another thing you could take a look at.
And there was blackmail too involved.
Yes, and blackmail. So you could use those kinds of things to broaden your search terms. And then what you could do with these, I'm going to take you someplace else. I'm going to go back to the library homepage. So it's pretty easy. You can just click on the full text links and summon. So that was summon that we were just in.
Right.
So the other thing that you can do is you can go to Google Scholar. So once you've got some information, now this Google Scholar is only going to give you scholarly articles, okay? Right. And some other kinds of things. So if we click on Google Scholar, we want to do it from the library homepage. It'll give us links to the things that we own. So I'm going to try that. I'm not going to put murders in with the quotes, because what I learned from our other search is it's not necessarily, sometimes they're describing it as bomb explosions, sometimes they're describing it as blackmail. So I'm just going to put Black Hand and then murders outside of that. And then we can see that there's some other things that might be here that we could take a look at. And then we start to get, what's nice about Google Scholar is they'll start giving us books. Now, the thing about Google Scholar in books is you can look at some of the pages some of the time, but you can't look at all of the pages all of the time. So what we would have to do is take this, if we wanted this book, we could take that title and we could go to the library homepage and we could quick search it. Do we have it in the library? And the answer is, it doesn't look that way.
Right.
So sometimes we don't have particular books, but sometimes it'll bring up other stuff too.
And that article, the Black Hand Journal of Criminal Justice, that probably is related in some way, even
absolutely,
though it's 2002. And
yeah,
it's worth
so these are recent.
Mm-hmm.
So again, you might feel like you're going in circles sometimes, but you're really just digging in different
Right.
places, like you said.
Yeah.
And then some things are just going to be, full text that you'll be able to access. These are not all scholarly articles. Some things are different kinds of resources. So sometimes it's a master's thesis or dissertation that somebody has written. Looking at the reference lists in resources can be really helpful.
Okay.
And then
So-
finally, we talked about old magazines.
Yeah,
So,
like Time, Newsweek, Saturday
we have
Evening Post,
recently changed a lot of our resources. So there's some I can't remember all of the ones that we have. So I'm just going to have to do, oh, and you know what else? We've got criminal justice databases. I'm back in the article database page. That could also be a good place to look, since
Sure.
these are all crime-oriented
Yep.
sort of activities. So you could look in some of those to see if you could find articles. Gosh, it's not history. I'm going to just take a quick look. You don't have to do this.
Yeah, that's okay.
I'm going to see what kind of, we used to have some old magazines, and I can't remember. Now this Time is open access, so it's probably not going to have access to oldest stuff, just like really the most current issues and things like that.
Would some articles come up when you use the summon? Doesn't that kind of capture most of everything?
Yeah, and so like using the date range to narrow things down is
right.
going to help.
Right.
We just used to have, I wonder, well, you know what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a look, one more thing here. Yeah, if we take a look at some of our primary sources. So, primary sources are documents, letters, things like that. So I'm just going to go to, we have a guide for primary sources. I just can go to research guides and look for that. I'll send you a list of links when we're done too.
Okay.
So you can see we've got historic newspapers here. So these are the historic newspapers that you could look at.
Right.
Locating primary source materials. Here it is. Okay, so we've got locating primary source materials. What I wanted to look at is the American Periodical Series. Now this stops at 1900. Do you have anything prior to 1900?
I'm not using any. I do have some.
Okay.
I'm not using them this time.
But that's cool. So now this one is the 19th century collection, is what we call the long 19th century. So it actually pushes into the 20th century a little bit. So I'm wondering if we did Black Hand here, if we might find anything. No, not really.
Well, it's at that.
Oh, but here's something here.
Right. Well,
Black Hand Society.
I think the Black Hand Society, again, I'm just remembering this. That's there. Well, one person that really was involved was a New York City police officer whose last name was like Petrosini. And he somehow, as I remember this case from back in the day, had a lot to do with it, with investigating it. And he traced it back to Italy, because ultimately the Black Hand murders that we'd be looking at involve what was called or is called the mafia. I mean, early on. So Petrosini, who was Italian American, ended up, as I recall, going to Sicily and looking for the culprits, the criminals involved in the case and so on.
So you can sometimes find in these primary source, this had a little bit, there was an article, not this one here, but it's a very tiny article, but it's still is saying that this fire was a
but it says have been
arson.
Stated have been the work of an Italian organization known as the Black Hand Society. So that in of itself is a tip too.
Yeah.
Now we know Black Hand Society is, the full name or the proper name of it. Okay.
So you got some stuff. I do think, again, I do want to let the students know too that you're welcome to contact me if you want to make an appointment. That's fine. If you're having trouble accessing something, you can go to the help page, the help link on the library homepage. On any library page, it'll show up, and you can chat with a librarian 24/7. Because these are like really specialized, they might say, I'm going to refer you back to the librarian, but in some cases, they can just help you with that initial searching.
Sure.
So that can be really helpful.
Another tool.
Yeah, another tool. Exactly. And then, so don't be afraid to poke around, but I would really highly recommend starting with the historical newspaper page as your first
under article database,
right? Under article databases, and then just going to under subjects, going to newspapers, right. Because I really think that that's going to give you the clues that you need to do your searching in other places. How's that sound?
That sounds great. All right. That's the missing link here.
Okay.
God bless.
All right. I'm going to stop our recording. Good luck, everybody, on your papers.